Hi, good morning and welcome to another weekly update. I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm whispering a little bit, but it's early in the morning. I just woke up really early and felt like might as well film this update and people are still sleeping. So I'm trying to be quiet. This is gonna be a fun weekly update because first I have finished some books. I'm in the middle of a bunch of them and I want to share my September TBR. But I've also put down a new little bookshelf. I built a built-in bookshelf in the living room like a month ago. It was a crazy project, would not recommend, but I like the result. The little bookshelf that used to be there I now put here, and because I've been reading so many romances I decided to make little romance shelves. Before we get into the yapping, let's have a little satisfying montage of me trying to reorganize the mess that is this room. I have finished 2 books. I finished my first read for Women in Translation Month. It's almost the end of August, we're not talking about it. It's Hunchback. We follow a main character who is 40 years old, or she's almost 40, it's discussed in the book. She is disabled and she lives in a care facility that is set up by her parents who had quite a lot of money. So she's a disabled person who doesn't have any financial worries, which I think is quite a unique perspective as well. This is definitely literary fiction, a novella. It's very short, it's not even 100 pages. But we follow this main character as she writes on the internet for things. So she finds jobs, writing jobs on the internet, which can be anything, but one of those things is that she writes erotic fiction. Throughout this novella we see the theme of writing your own fiction and living your own reality and how that all comes together and mixes, and how it's also, I think, a survival mechanism for her existing in her own body and needing care and needing help with certain things. And then we also have a carer who does not seem to like her, but we don't really get to know him a lot, just the way he behaves towards her and the thoughts she has about him. There are a few parts in this book where we read her fiction instead of following her inner thoughts, and that does play a little bit with what is reality and what is not, especially towards the ending, which I found both really fitting for the novel or for the novella, but also frustrating for me as a reader. This novella was very gripping, very fresh, and I can't really see how it's nominated for multiple prizes. I think it only made long lists on the International Booker and the European Literature Prize. I don't think it won anything, but yeah, I can see why this gotten so much attention. It was published in Japanese in 2023 and translated into English this year. And then unfortunately a bit of a disappointing one that I did anticipate and had quite high expectations for. You could have seen me hinting towards me not enjoying this book, but that is Rules of the Heart by Janice Hadlow. This is a historical fiction set in England in 1794. We start out, I believe, and we follow Lady Henrietta Bessember, I think is how you say it. She was a historical figure, a real life figure, and these events are partly based on real life. She had a lover for most of her life. She met him when she was in her 30s, he was in his early 20s, and they stayed together for a really long time. And while that sounds fascinating, it was actually really boring, unfortunately. There is no real plot in this book besides, not even will they, won't they, because they will, but it's constantly her. Does he like me? Does he not like me? Does he take me seriously? Does he really love me? And that all comes secondary to the real life consequences of their affair, which has really heartbreaking influence on so many people that are involved with them. This book was also really long. For such a meager plot, I felt like this book would have been so much better in short story format or in just a book that has multiple plot points. This just had the one plot. And in the beginning of the book we get introduced to Sally, who is her servant, and I really got the idea, okay, we see this friendship a lot, but we didn't. Sally was barely there. It was set up like we would get a relationship between people of different class, but then the main character was constantly complaining that she was so alone and no one was in her corner, while Sally was literally doing everything for her, perpetuating the idea that servants aren't real people. And it was so hard to root for this main character. She was unlikable because most of her problems were created by herself, and she felt incredibly sorry for herself. The self-pity of this woman was insane. And I agree, there were some heartbreaking things that whatever your situation, whoever you are, would be incredibly tough to experience. But because I disliked her so much, it was just hard to care and to feel sorry for her. And the plot did a little bit more, so when these two were close to the consequences really catching up with them, I found the book more interesting. Generally, it was a romance that shouldn't be a romance. The whole idea was that this romance was beautiful and necessary because it was from a place of passion. And I feel like, are we teenagers? I do have two positive things about this book to say though. I think writing wise, this was really solid. Janice Hadlow can write. On a sentence level, this book was really good. I was never annoyed by the writing itself. The historical setting was very convincing. I very much bought that everything that I read fitted in the historical time period, and I thought just that was really well done. So it's a bit strange to have a book that I quite disliked reading and found quite boring reading still seeing the merit of the quality of the book, so I'm gonna end up giving it 3 stars. Who else has seen the trailer or the images for the TV adaptation or film of Hamnet? I darkened my screen immediately when I saw it because I've not read the book yet and I don't want any previous impressions of it before I read the book. I just decided to read it. I picked up the audiobook quite a long time ago. It was just sitting in my library, so now I've started listening to it. Very excited to talk to you about Hamnet once I've listened to a little bit more of it. And I also started another audiobook. I am at a place again where I start too many books at the same time, which is overwhelming, but it also really works for me. Because when it comes to reading, I don't always want the same vibe. And so Hamnet is very much a relaxed, late time kind of book. Reading another book that's just very weird and high focus, which is one of the books for Women in Translation Month that I picked up, and also one that is shortlisted for the European Literature Prize. As I'm filming this, the winner is not yet announced. So this is a book, I think it's also a novella, that was translated from the Catalan by Mara V. Lethem. The author is Irene Sola. I Gave You Eyes and You Look Towards Darkness. This immediately gave me 100 Years of Solitude meets The Bear and the Nightingale, which I know is a very weird description. If you've read both of those books, you're like, they have nothing in common. The weird family relations and the toxic family relations of 100 Years of Solitude meets the fantasy fairy tale vibe of The Bear and the Nightingale. That's very much rooted in folklore. So I'm assuming this is rooted in Catalan folklore, which I clearly know absolutely nothing about. So far the folklore is really focusing on generational deficiencies, both physical and mental. And it's quite interesting. So we follow, I think, a woman who is very old, very elderly, and we follow her as she is on her deathbed between life and death. And she meets her ancestors and we learn more about her ancestors' life, and we go a little bit back and forth. It's a very confusing book, but I'm enjoying the writing. Will I be able to know exactly what has happened in this book and what's going on? I don't think so, but I'm doing the best I can. Another book that I've started but haven't gotten very far into is The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yogo Ogawa. This is translated from the Japanese by Stephen Snyder. I am on page 35 only. So here we follow a woman in her late 20s and she works as a housekeeper. She has had multiple jobs and then she is hired to take care of an old, or he's in his 60s, previous mathematics professor. And this professor has had an accident, meaning that he doesn't have long-term memory. So every 80 minutes he forgets what has happened to him again. The writing is so beautiful and delicate. You're so present with these characters, which I'm really enjoying. And we also follow the main character's son, who develops a certain relationship as well with the professor, where the professor is really caring and interested in him and also in the housekeeper and in their intellectual development, even though he keeps forgetting who they are. It's just his natural state of being to want people to understand numbers and to understand the world. Decided to keep on reading this. Hold on to your hats, because I am actually enjoying a book that I felt like I might DNF. I joined Nicole Monday. Yes, on Monday I joined Nicole for reading sprints. She does really long reading sprints, but we are in a different time zone. Only able to join her for the first 6 hours, which was actually really nice and really refreshing. And gosh, she's a nice person, and her subscribers are so kind and involved, and so just I felt so welcome when I joined those sprints, and it was just so lovely. So thank you so much, Nicole, for having me. But that did mean I had a lot of motivation to read, and I read quite a decent chunk of Women Who Won with Wolves. I am now on page 129. But seeing how dense this book is, that meant I read a big chunk during those sprints. I also used those sprints to finish Rules of the Heart, but I don't know if you can see, I started quite actively annotating it, because while I did not enjoy the introduction and the first chapter, the second chapter, I hope I'm saying this right, I think so, was so interesting. In the second chapter we follow the story of Baba Yaga. Chapter 3 is the one that I really enjoyed, Vasalisa, the story of Vasalisa, which is basically Cinderella, but its original tale. I didn't know Cinderella was so heavily based on Eastern European myth, but it's basically Cinderella's story, but much more gruesome, and there's so much more behind it. So in chapter 3, this author depicts that whole story and explains the meaning in every item in the story, every conversation, every piece of clothing, everything in the story has so much meaning, and I really enjoyed that, not just as an analysis of a story, but mostly as a way to explain how women told each other to be. Gonna be super vague about this because this book is very vague. I think what I will do once I finish this is sit with it and try to write an analysis on it and maybe film a review. I've done that for a few feminist texts. Somehow it feels like the only way to really discuss these kind of texts, because discussing it in a wrap up, I don't have enough time, and I don't have enough prep time. That's mostly the thing. Heading into September, I still have a few Women in Translation month books I want to read, so I'm taking those with me. As of now, it is these 4 that I will not finish before the end of August. I feel like autumn is always the time for readathons. I already know 2, maybe 3 readathons I'm joining in autumn, and in September we have the Magical Readathon. Having said that, the Magical Readathon is not really the part of BookTube where I am most active, but it is the part of BookTube where I was active as a viewer before I started to be a booktuber myself, so I still have such affinity and love for that corner of BookTube, which is the very fantasy corner of BookTube. And I do always join the Magical Readathon because it's so creative, so fun. It's really something different. It feels so fresh. So the Magical Readathon it used to be a bit different, but right now a lot of people say is reminiscent of D&D, and it is a magical school where you create a character, which I think is so fun and creative. That character goes to school and you have all the semesters, yes, that's what it's called. You have all the semesters, and then you pick what kind of profession you would like to be for your character, and then you have certain reading prompts and you read those books. I joined from the very beginning, and the character that I made previously was just kind of me, but fantasy-esque. Gone through with that character for 3 years, so I decided, you know what, let's make a new one. My new character is called Evie because I think that's a fun name. I made a little collage of her vibes, very much autumn vibe. She's a creative introvert that just likes to spend time by herself, making things, crafting. So I wanted to give her a creative career. A thread mage, so basically someone who makes beautiful things. And it says key traits: creative, detail-oriented, and experimental. I am not very detail-oriented, but apparently Evie is. Definitely the creative and the experimental really spoke to me, and I think this will also be a great just vibe motivation reason to do more crafting. I have so many crafts that I don't want to say abandoned, but I didn't have time to do that while also running a business. So now that Milena's bookshop is coming to a close, I hope that this autumn I can do way more crafts again. Because of that, for all the prompts, and there are 6, I decided to pick audiobooks. Also because I still have the 4 Women in Translation month books I would like to read, and those are, I believe, all physical reads. Just figured I will pick all audiobooks, and that will motivate me to pick up a craft to do while listening to the audiobook. Alright, so the first prompt was very difficult immediately. You needed to use your birth flower on the cover, and I am born in August, and you had, gosh, I didn't note it down exactly what it was, but it was one flower that I couldn't really find anywhere, and poppies. Poppies are easier to find on book covers, so I decided to pick a romance that comes out in September from one of my new favorite romance authors, and this is People Watching by Hannah Bonham Young. And if you look at the cover, I believe those are poppies. If they're not, then I don't know what they are, but they look most like poppies to me. Another prompt was to have a sun on the cover. I looked through my Libro FM new releases, early copies, and I saw this book that sounded intriguing, fairy tale myth-esque as well, which apparently I am in the mood for. And that is Gracilia in the Abyss by Meg Medina. This is quite a short book, and if you look at the cover, it is very fairy tale-esque, and I think it's also a little bit horror, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm excited for what this book will be, because I'm not entirely sure, but it was one of the books that had a sun on the cover. Then there was a prompt where you had to roll a D&D die, and then you had to match that with the amount of pages a book has. So I did the digital one because I don't have a physical one, and I came out to a book between 2 and 200 pages, which again, finding an audiobook under 200 pages is not that easy. But I found one in my Libro FM list that I looked at the cover and I thought, oh, this is cozy. Maybe it's even cozy mystery, I'm not sure, but it's cozy and I want cozy. And this is French Windows by Antoine Laurent. The tagline is 1 patient, 1 therapist, 5 floors of intrigue. And it reminded me just the description of the series Only Murders in a Building, which is like a comfort show of mine. I wait until all the episodes are released and then I just watch it on a rainy day. So I'm having slight hopes that it's similar vibes to that. Another prompt that I found difficult but fun is a prime number of letters in the title, and I found a book that I'm going to match to the Readathon as well, because Kayla recommended this, and that is Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. So Forget Me Not has 11 letters, which is a prime number, apparently. I don't know much about numbers, but the internet does, which is helpful. And the Readathon prompt is foliage on the cover, which this book has, so I thought it was fitting to pick a recommendation from Kayla as well. 2 more prompts. One is a single POV, which is not something that book descriptions tell you beforehand. Even if you listen to the audiobook, they might switch in the next chapter. For as far as I know, this author writes single POVs. If it turns out to be something different, I will pick something else for this prompt. But something that came out in July is Sophie Irwin's new book, and she writes Regency or historical romances that are really, really fun. And this is How to Lose a Lord in 10 Days. I think it's loosely based on the film How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, which was one of my favorite rom-coms back in the day. I think it is about a main character who agrees to a proposal, tries to keep him off, or she gives the impression that she will agree and then she needs to get rid of him, which sounds really, really fun. And then a 2025 release. I am still in my new releases era, so again, went through my Libro FM early copies and just picked the book that I'm most excited for. And I've seen this in some anticipated releases from people on BookTube. And this is Aphrodite by Finnica Rogerson. I think the time for myth retelling, especially Greek myth retellings, is kind of over, but this had something interesting because we see Aphrodite, but from the perspective of everyone around her. So I think every chapter is from a different person around her. I saw the list of audiobook narrators, which is really long. So I am fascinated for this kind of writing because I don't think, at least not recently, I've not listened or read a book with this kind of concept. So I'm just very curious about this book, and curiosity is one of the best reasons to start reading something. That means on my September TBR I have 4 physical books and 6 audiobooks, which is more books than I would usually put on a TBR, but again, because it's audiobooks and a lot of romances, I go through them really fast. Having said that, I read a romance without even telling you about it. This was Whirlwind by Kayla Gross. Here's his 3 stars. This is Twisters the film, but make it a romance and make it a professor-student kind of thing. Felt the same way as I did about Kayla Gross's novella, where I feel like it is perfect for what it is, but nothing more. Like, as compared to other like more solid romances who do a lot of character work, this is just very insta-lust, lovey, just fun. It's a great time. I love the action in this book, but that's about it. Yeah. Great fun, but it doesn't compare to me to romances that are a bit longer and do a bit more character and plot work, that are a bit more than just the erotica and the romance in it. I would still like recommend it if that is exactly what you're looking for, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with these books. I think that's it for this weekly update. I am working towards something I am so excited about, and I'm just warning you that I'm going extra in the sense that I have purchase things for it that I did not have to purchase for it, but I did because I'm so excited. And my personality is a bit extra, and right now what I need is to focus on things that make me just really excited, really happy. And I'm very much allowing myself a lot of leeway within that, because of course I'm closing a chapter, and anything that I can hold on to that makes me happy and excited, I'm going full in. And I think most of that you will actually already see next week. I'm so excited. It's gonna be so much fun. And I will see you next week with something very extra. Alright, I hope that you have a lovely, lovely day or evening, and I will see you then. Doei!